a big hand. Though if I were in your position, I would be asking as well. All right, so last lecture we went over all the different types of memory addressing. Right. So we had intermediate, register, base addressing, where we take a value from a register, add it to the immediate value, and obtain, sign extend it to get our base addressing. Or what's the term for this when we sign extend by 2? Oh no, I'm sorry. Neglect that question. We're going to get to that here. What's the term for it that we have to shift left to here in VC relative? What type of addressing are we doing in MEMS? Byte addressing, right? So that means we store memory in blocks of 8. So word addressing, that means you store it in blocks of 32. And then pseudo direct. So this is a very important concept. So we have 3 different types of memory elements. Now that you're kind of starting to see here, let's see if I can use the touchscreen to zoom in a little better. There we go. They're separated in instruction memory, data memory, and registers. So registers are fast. Instruction memory is where we store all the instructions that we've received from the compiler-driven encoding of the microengine. We are also going to have this data memory. Now, data memory is where we store the non-volatile memory, which means that when the computer is turned off, it's where that information is stored, right? So the reason why we separate it out is we're going to try to avoid this concept called a control hazard. Nice, people trying to sneak down. People pay attention for a second. So the whole idea is we're going to learn about a concept called pipelining later. Does anybody have an idea what pipelining is? Anyone else besides Alex? All right, Alex, what is pipelining? All right, so the general idea of pipelining is not crap, oh crap, oh crap. So when you see it, maybe you'll think that when I teach it later. The idea is we're trying to get multiple instructions into the data path simultaneously. So we break it into stages where we're executing that stage of an instruction, but the different stage of the data path is doing that stage of a different instruction. So what ends up happening is the whole goal is to try to make the computer run faster, try to get in as much as possible. Well, the problem is we run into these things called control hazards, which is what I'm alluding to here. So we keep our instruction memory and data memory separate. So for example, if we have a branch instruction, remember the branch instruction is where we're deciding whether or not to do an if statement. But if we have multiple instructions, that means by definition we actually have please wait until the end of the It means we have the next instruction already in the data path, right? The one we haven't decided whether or not we want to do. So we have to make was there like a late bus or something? What happened? I'm asking out of just curiosity. I'm not trying to insult anybody. Is there like a late bus or what was going on? Late class?
Yeah. I have a chemistry class.
Okay, you guys just come by after the lecture. Okay. When it's one person, it's one thing. When it's like 3 or 4, that's like, oh, we did a bus breakdown. Okay, so that means we have to decide whether or not we're going to execute an instruction that's already in the data path, right? So that's what we have to worry about, these control hazards. So that keeps us separate, allows us to use these control signals. So that becomes important to how do we actually organize memory? How do we actually make sure that we're doing everything properly? So, 3.8. This whole idea, what we're going to call the principle of locality. So define the principle of locality and state the 2 types of locality. You can see my little 4 stars there. Right? You'll see that next week, right? Principle of locality. A program tends to access data that forms physical clusters in memory. Multiple accesses may be made within the same block. So when you think about this, it kind of makes sense. When you have an array is a block of words, 32-bit words, right? So that means if we're going to be constantly accessing the array, then we want to access this same physical cluster of memory. Instruction memory, we have all the instructions right next to each other. We might be jumping back and forth between them, but they're all in the same physical cluster. That make sense? So there's two types of locality, temporal and spatial. Temporal, if an item is referenced, it will tend to be referenced again soon. Right? So what that means is we actually want to constantly kind of reuse variables. You don't want to have, you don't want to take up too much space in memory. So you want, this is why understanding how the architecture works will make you a better coder. For those of you who are computer science majors, the reason why taking this kind of advanced digital systems course is important is because if you understand the underlying system attributes of the computer that contribute to physical details, contribute to its execution and are visible to the programmer, that visible programmer means that if you write better, more concise code that matches to the architecture, you will your program will run faster. Nothing's more annoying than when you run an app that runs really slow, right? That person did not understand advanced digital systems. If you do this properly and you write it to the right architecture, you can make yourself a lot of money. And part of this is understanding the principle of locality, specifically temporal locality. The other one is spatial locality. If an item is referenced, items whose memory addresses are close by will tend to be referenced soon. So kind of what I was just talking about with arrays, with instruction memory, we split up instruction memory and data memory. We're trying to access the same elements over and over. And the reason why in section 1 I harped on this, concept of data being separated into registers and using load stars only. Load stars means we want to grab a different physical cluster and bring it into the registers, right? That slow memory, we only want to access it when we absolutely need physical clusters. So the registers, faster, we're accessing them over and over and over again, and then when we're done with it, we put it back into data memory. Now, how many of you have taken operating systems? None. Okay. So the flaw in this is that there's this concept called thrashing. And so this is kind of something for those of you who are, I think, if you're a computer engineering emphasis or a computer science major, you have to take operating systems. So if you don't properly regulate when you're moving spatial locality back and forth, you'll do one or two accesses, have to grab another big physical cluster, bring it in, one or two physical clusters, bring it in. If you are doing more movement of physical clusters of memory, that's known as thrashing. And it causes severe degradation in performance. So that's why we want to focus on, this is why this is such an important concept other than just I'm telling you that's going to be on the exam next week. Right? This is something that will be very useful for you in your career. And so understanding that means we have to understand another term, and that's memory hierarchy. Memory hierarchy is a structure that uses multiple levels of memory, and in this we'll refer to them as cache. Multiple levels of memory in order to improve memory access time. So the different levels of cache are going to have different access speeds. And so items in cache memory that we're going to access more often, but less often than the registers, will be in level 1 cache. Then we have level 2 cache, which is we accessing a little less, but we still need it. And then we have the level 3 cache memory. So here's the question, and this is a very common interview question. So I'm very curious to see how you guys answer it. If we have this really fast cache memory, why not just make all the cache memory that one level fast cache memory? Why would that be bad? What do you think the problem might be?
Wouldn't that kind of defeat the purpose? Like, wouldn't it kind of slow it all down if it was all in one place?
Okay, so you're on the right path. That's one issue. Common accesses, you want to be able to, we're going to be talking about something called direct and set allocation memory. That's part of the issue. But let's say we're still able to access it all really fast. What could be another issue? Expensive as all get out. CACHE is cache, but oftentimes you can think of it as cache CASH, right? Good design requires good compromise. And in this case, it's faster, but also means more expensive. So it's like, okay, we're going to use some of this memory less. That means let's use this less expensive memory, level 2. We're going to use this even less, even more, but we still need it. Level 3, even cost less, but we'll only access it when we absolutely need to. So here, I'll zoom out here. Here we have the processor and the same thing. Size, smallest to biggest. So the registers in the processor, it's going to be the smallest size. We have 32 registers in MIPS, right? So cost is highest, so the cost goes in the opposite direction. So if you can't see it, this is a figure from your textbook. So this is speed, fastest to slowest, size, slowest to largest. So this says processor, memory, larger memory, and even larger memory. So you got cache levels here. So smallest to biggest size. So you got your direct or set associativity. So you have certain trade-offs, and you put in another block and put it back. And then let's say you need to go to the next level. The memory you need is here, right? Okay, well now you need to swap here, swap some out. Then you got to swap that in here and swap something out there. So it becomes more complex. So in order to deal with that, cost per bit becomes the lowest. And so you get your volatile, you have your SRAM, dynamic RAM, and then here they're talking about magnetic disks. So as the distance from the processor increases, the size of the memories and access time of both increase. In fact, the access time from main memory may be up to 100 times more than in your registers. So that's why we want to use these registers, and we don't want to do excessive load stores. Because if you take 100 nanoseconds to access data memory, but only takes 1 nanosecond to access your register, which one do you think you want to be using? So you want to take advantage of this principle of locality. You want to try to be very effective with how you code such that all the memory clusters are together, so that way the registers are constantly used in the same space. So you're taking advantage of temporal locality, and you want to reuse the variables as much as possible without having to go outside that spatial locality. Okay. And so we're going to, here I want to formally define cache, memory, and block. So cache memory is the level of memory hierarchy between the processor and main memory. So main memory is where you put it, computer turns off, you're good, magnetic disk. Cache, so when you're looking at your computer, it says 528. You got 2 gigabytes of RAM, and you have all this 128 gigabytes of storage. That's cache memory. So you're bringing in some from the disk to the cache, and then from there you're doing swaps with your registers. So you're trying to improve the speed as much as possible. So cache memory is defined as the level of memory hierarchy between the processor and main memory, and we use it to take advantage of temporal and spatial locality. And we're going to define a block, and you're going to see this as we go through the rest of the section. This is a very important concept. A block is the minimum amount of data transferred between cache and main memory. And the reason why this is important is because it allows you to know precisely how much you can try to fit into one of these blocks and how much you can possibly get into a program, how many blocks you need to execute a program, and try to minimize the number of swaps that you'll need. And as we'll see, there's different ways to improve blocks. So in this course, we're going to compare 2 types. We're going to call it direct associativity and set associativity. And we're seeing in most cases that set associativity is better. But of course, that comes with trade-offs, because everything does, because it's advantageous systems. Okay, while people are finishing up writing, does anybody have any questions on memory hierarchy, locality, cache, and blocks? Yes?
What would flash memory be, sir?
Flash would typically is going to be a cache memory. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. So this is an example of data transfer. I think I kind of drew this out before, but the whole idea is, let's say the processor, hey, I don't have what I need. I'll go here. Is it in this block? So this, we define this blue as a block. Is this what, is anything that I have here, what is that the piece of data that I'm looking for, is it there? If it says no, then what happens is we have to go to the next level. Then I find this block. That's where my data is. So before I can get to the processor, the first thing I need to do is put it into the level 1 cache. And then I have to select the least recently used block, put it back. And then I want to take this block, put it into the processor, get the register information, swap it out, and then put it back. And then we start with the new data that we finally got in here. Then we execute the program. So that, remember last lecture I was talking about exceptions and interrupts? One exception. What happens when the data that I want to execute on is not in the registers? Stop in the name of programming, get my block, come back, and then execute. All right, so other ones, other big terms I want you to know, because we're going to start going into equations here in a minute. Cache hit. Cache hit. If the requested data is in the cache, we're going to read or perform a read or write up. I'm sorry, a read or write operation is performed directly in the cache without accessing main memory. So that means we want to get it, put it in the registers, and execute. The worst case scenario is accessing main memory. We want to avoid going to those tapes as much as possible, the magnetic tapes. Hit rate, the probability that a requested memory probability that a requested memory item is in the cache. So if you've taken probability at all, everything's between 0 and 1, right? So 95% probability means 0.95. Cache miss, obviously it'd be the antonym of cache hit. If the requested word, or in this case byte, or whatever we access here, is not in the cache, a block of words containing the requested word is brought to the cache. So a word is 32 bits, or 4 bytes. And then the processor request is completed. So what I just described before in the diagram is what's known as a cache miss. I look in level 1 cache, it's not there. Then I go to level 2 cache, that was a cache hit. I didn't leave the cache. If I had to go to data memory, then we have to bring in a lot of stuff from the data memory. That takes a tremendous amount of time. And there's a whole field of engineering that goes into designing cache memory and using algorithms in order to be able to access it. So and it pays really well. Like I think for a bachelor's degree, if you're going to work at like Texas Instruments, they'll pay like $110,000 to start. So that counts benefits and everything, but you get the idea. And then finally, miss rate is the opposite of hit rate. The probability that a requested memory item is not in the memory, and it's 0 to 1, and it's going to be 1 minus the hit rate. So if my hit rate is 0.95, then my miss rate is 0.05, because that becomes 1 minus 0.95. And so what we're using all of these terms to calculate is something called average memory access time. So if I have a number of different levels of cache, I want to be able to figure out what my average memory access time is based on the probability of a cache hit at each level. What's the probability that I'm not going to find in the registers? What's the probability I'm not going to find at level 1? What's the probability I'm not going to find at level 2? And then what's the probability I'm not going to find at level 3? So ultimately, we have to worry about cache hits, hit rate, cache miss, and then miss rate. So for a level 1 cache hit, the average memory access time, given that the actual time it takes to access the cache if we get a hit, is TC, and the TM is main memory access time. So here we have one level of cache. And as we build level 1, level 2, level 3, we're going to get to what you were alluding to in your answer. Average memory access time is the hit rate So as I was saying, this would be 0.95, right? Times whatever the cache time is, plus 1 minus hit rate, so this would be 0.05. And then you have the cache time. So if it takes 10 nanoseconds, we have to look, it takes 10 nanoseconds to look here, and then takes another 100 nanoseconds to look in the main memory, right? Because we have to look there, miss 5% of the time, TC plus TM. The reason why it's that way is, think of it this way. You're trying to figure out where your friend lives, right? Oh, I know it's one of these 4 houses. Right? It takes you a certain amount of time to go to one driveway. Not there, right? Go to the second driveway. Second driveway is a little longer. Go there, not there. Do the third driveway. You have to go all the way in the back. And I find out, I'm looking for my buddy Trentarius, right? Here he is. So that takes a lot longer every time. So you have to add those up. So you have to have those kind of TC plus TM in this case, which is why the equation is set up this way. And so the next thing we're going to do an example. And what we're going to be building up toward in these next 3 examples is level 1, level 2, level 3 cache, where we have 3 different cache levels. And the type of question you'll see on the exam is, given a level 3 cache, do this. So, given a level 1 cache with a hit rate of 95%, a cache access time of 5 nanoseconds, and a memory access time of 100 nanoseconds, find the average memory access time. So use our equation from the TGO. We know that hit rate times the access time plus the miss rate, which is 1 minus h, times cache plus miss. So in this case, 0.95 times 5 nanoseconds, that means 95% of the time, it'll take us 5 nanoseconds to find what we want, right? However, 5% of the time, it's going to take us 5 nanoseconds to look at the initial place, plus 100 nanoseconds to find it in memory, right? Therefore, 4.75 nanoseconds plus 6.25 nanoseconds equals 10 nanoseconds. That means on average, for an entire program, that's how long it's going to be. And then for the second one, let's say I have, this is a good example of why it's important to use cache memory in this scenario. Example 2, given a level 1 cache with a hit rate of 95%, cache 5 nanoseconds, and memory access time 100 nanoseconds, determine the speed up over the same processor without cache. So if we don't have cache memory, that just means 100% of the time it's going to take us 100 nanoseconds, right? Which means we use our equation, 0 times 5 nanoseconds plus 1 minus 0 times 100 nanoseconds. Then we have the same equation here that we used before. This is just the same equation. So this becomes 100 nanoseconds over 10 nanoseconds. So therefore, by adding a level 1 level cache, we've already provided a speed up of 10. So now, we talked about what Emily was discussing. How do we properly access it to improve our access time? Why do we add multiple levels of cache? So, let's derive this equation except for a level 2 cache and then for a level 3 cache. So, these equations initially seem a little daunting until you kind of realize what it is they're saying. So, think of it as probabilities, right? If you have a probability, you're coming in, if you have a hit in level 1, then it's going to be hit 1 times TC1, right? But if you miss, this is TC1, right? Say you 1 minus hit 1, and then it's either going to be a hit in level 2, or it's going to be a miss at level 2, right? And if you miss in level 2, it's either going to be a hit in level 3, or a miss in level 3, at which place we go to memory. So to build these two equations, just think of it as a probability tree. And then each time you have to go looking in each level. So that's where your times come in. So our first branch, what happens when we hit in level 1? Hit level 1 times the cache time 1, right? Plus 1 minus hit 1. And as you can see, this is completely bracketed. That means you would not be able to access any of that, right, unless you had a level 1 miss. So then you have hit rate 2 times cache 1 plus cache 2, right? Then you have what happens if you have a level 2 miss. Then you have cache 1 plus cache 2 plus memory access time. So without looking at, that'll work, good enough. Without looking at level 3, the next TGO, what do you think that, how do we actually continue to build on the level 3 cache? Yes?
Instead of in that last part of the equation, putting in memory time access, you throw in the next level.
Exactly right. So then you do 1 minus hit 2 becomes hit 3 times T1, T2, T3 plus 1 minus T3 memory access time. And that is exactly what we have here. So this is the one, come on. And you can see here, for those of you watching the video, you can see I added the red bracket there specifically so you can see where we just changed the equation. So hit 1 times TC1 plus hit 1, 1 minus hit 1, second bracket, hit 2, TC1 plus TC2 plus 1 minus hit 2, then hit 3, add the 3 of them together, plus 1 minus hit 3, add all 3 plus the memory access time. Does that make sense? Because each one we have to add more time. But what you're going to see when we work through these next equations are the more level, eventually you're going to hit, I have 2 thoughts I was about to combine into one. You're going to see that the average memory access time goes down, but you're also going to see that level 3 is about where we want to stop adding levels of cache. And we're going to show why. So again, we plug in our equations. We use our level 2 cache here because the processor in example 3.1 is given a level 2 cache with a hit act rate of time of 85%. So as we're starting to see is demonstrating the problem, our hit rates for the levels of cache are going to go down and our access time is going to go up. And we plug in the equation here. We have the 0.95, 0.95, 0.85 times 12 nanoseconds. And we come up with, where do we come up with 12 nanoseconds? 7 plus 5, very good. So we have the level 1 of 5 plus level 2 of 7. So we have this 7 here. So level 1 was 5 from the problem. 5 plus 7 is 12. Plus 1 minus 0.85 times 112 because we have the 100 nanoseconds from main memory, right? And then you plug that in, and then you get 6.1. In 3.4, the processor in example 3 is given a level 3 cache of 80% and a cache access time of 10 nanoseconds. Find the average memory access time. So the question on the exam would give you the level 1 cache hit rate, level 1 access time, level 2 hit rate, level 2 access time, level 3 hit rate, level 3 access time, and the memory access time. That's what you'd be provided on an exam question. Now, when you get that problem, this here is sufficient for full, this is sufficient for full credit. Putting the equation and then plugging in the numbers. I am not testing you on your ability to put numbers into a calculator, right? I'm testing you on your ability to tell me what the equation is and how that correlates to the numbers in the in the problem. Beyond that, the reason why I included it in the lecture and why I want you to do on the homework is because we're comparing how we initially had 10 nanoseconds in the first example question, right? Then in the second example question, we had 6.1. Third one, we needed 5.75. So what we can see is that we had 10, 6.1, 5.75. So those who remember from calculus, you're about to reach a asymptotic point, and each one you add, guess what? Starting to add money. So your money is going up. So where that tends to find in is at level 3.
Is that an application of Amdahl's?
Yes. Exactly right. It is. The question for those of you watching the video later, is that an application of Amdahl's law? Yes. Amdahl's law plus economics. Right? Know it. Make yourself hireable. Okay. Does anybody have any questions on this? Yes.
So, is there a way to better improve the hit rates on your lower levels of cache?
Yes, you're to be answered in a second. You're thinking right, because you can. Does anybody have any other questions about the average memory access time, principle of locality? Anything else we've covered so far? Blocks, all that good stuff.
How many levels are there? How high will it go?
Okay, so typically it will stop at 3. And the reason why is because of the trade-off between you're reaching kind of that asymptotic point. Saw 10, 6.1, 5.575. Adding more and more on here, there's minimal benefit after a while. And the more levels of cache you add, the more CASH cache it'll cost you. Any other questions? Yes.
So do most computers have 3 levels of cache?
Yes. And the only times that they don't is because they're willing to trade off cost for reduced speed. Any others?
Is that why most applications run so slow the first time you run them?
Right. Okay. So what you are alluding to is this next part, data locality and cache blocks, right? So how do we actually make a program run faster? So when you try to run the program the first time, and you're having a compiler-driven encoding of the micro engine, you're trying to take advantage of this temporal locality, trying to get all the blocks together. So sometimes if you're running the program the first time, it has to install, it has to figure out what compiler you're using, it has to figure out what architecture you're using. And the reason why Java is initially taught is because it allows you to learn how to code, but it takes care of most of this for you. C and C++, you have to do more memory allocation with malloc and calloc and pointers, right? So in this case, you have to eventually figure out how to map it to your program. So that is exactly why. So to answer Haithum's question, how do you try to reduce this? Well, first thought is, what happens if I have larger blocks? If I have a larger block, I'm more than likely to get all of the program in a block, right? So if I successfully get it in there, then I'm able to just access everything in the registers or lower levels of cache. However, larger blocks mean larger transfers when we actually have to transfer blocks. And if you have like 2 blocks like this and you get somebody who codes it poorly, and you have to go back and forth between, one element, one variable is in this block, and one variable is in this block, well then guess what? You have these huge trade-offs. You have smaller blocks, it allows you to actually trade off in your code faster, right? But it allows you a less ability to take advantage of temporal and spatial locality. So typically, to answer your question, you try to find the good compromise between block size and program size. Any other questions? All right, so in order to determine what actually we're using, is specifically where it is. Now, in not next section, before we get into cadence, we're going to be learning about concepts of virtual memory. But at the basic level, how do we associate where an element is in cache? So you still have 32 bits, right? It's a fixed memory width, fixed bandwidth. So we actually have to represent where that memory is in the cache hierarchy using the same 32 bits, because it's going to be issued in 32 bits. Our data memory is going to be in 32 bits. Our instruction memory is going to be 32 bits. So in this specific case, we had R-type, I-type, and J-type instructions to determine what the instruction actually was. We're using the same 32 bits to indicate where an element is in cache. So these are the three terms: index, tag, and valid bit. So the index is the numerical value used to indicate the exact location in the cache. The tag is a field in a table that contains the address of the information required to identify where the associated block corresponds to the data. And the valid bit is a field that indicates the valid bit is a field that indicates that the associated block in the hierarchy contains valid data. So step one, I'm trying to figure out where my specific memory element is. So I get this issued location in the cache. Could be level 1, could be level 2, could be level 3. The valid bit tells me, are you actually here? So let's say you're my valid bit. I go, all right, I'm looking for something. You got it? And your valid bit. Now, no, I'm not being used. Move on. What about you? You got my block? Sound like a junkie right here. That's how your cache memory works, right? But once I do have it, I go here, I'm like, oh, hey, it's in 5 move house? They're like, yeah, it's in 5 move house. So then next I have to figure out where it is, right? And figure out, oh, here's Sal. Sal's got my information, right? So as it turns out, what I need to do is I need to grab Sal, and I need to put him in the registers, right? And then we got somebody else over here, whatever happened to that poor pig or whatever it was in that town. I put it back over here, and I've created some sort of comedy, right? So that's the idea, right? So now we have to that's how we figure out this information. And that's why we use the tag. And so this first type of cache memory we'll study is direct map. So the diagram here will allow a better explanation of what the diagram there, once we get through one more TGO. Direct map cache is a cache structure in which each cache location is mapped to exactly one location in main memory. And so the size of the tag, we know how much memory we have, and we know the size of the block. So this is kind of going back to Hytham's question a little earlier. The size of the tag will be log base 2 of that. So if we have 1024 and we have a block size of 8, what's going to be my result? I'm sending you back to deal with logarithms, right? What's 1024? No. 2 to the 10th, right? Highly recommended for electrical engineering, computer science interviews. You should be able, any number from 2 to the 1st up to 2 to the 10th, you should be able to cite off the top of your head. Same thing from 2 to the -1 down to 2 to the -4, right? So it becomes 0.0625, 0.125, 0.25, 0.5, 2 to 0 is the first one. Then 2 to 1 is 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, 1024, right? So if anybody asks you any of those kind of numbers, you should be able to do that quickly. So, and when you get to higher level courses and you get to professors who are as Darth Vader would say less forgiving than I am, they will expect you to be able to do that. So we know that 124 is 10. So what's 8? 2 to the third. So what does that mean if I have 10 and 3? 2 to 7. Oh, 2 to 7. Log base 2. 7. That's 7. So that means that becomes log of 2 to the 10 over 2 to 3, which is equal to 10 minus 3. Remember, log 2 will all cancel out, right? So that becomes 7, which means that in this case, our tag is going to be 7 bits. That means we have each block is 8, and we have 124, which means we need 2 to 7 to be able to figure this out. And then the size of the index in each block, right? So basically what I did, if you think of it this way, let's assume we had 8 students in each row, right? That would be, then I have a certain number of rows that tell me which one is right. So if I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I would have a tag of 3. So I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if it's 0, 1, 1, I know that the block I want is here, right? And then I go, the index is 3, therefore, Travis is going to get this. See how that works? So now, we're actually going to see how this works in direct memory cache, and direct mapped cache. A cache structure in which each cache location is mapped exactly to one location in main memory. So here is a diagram. So where we have the size of the tag, we have 32 bits. So in this case, what this means is we have 32 here, right? 32 blocks of information. And the cache has 8 blocks. So that means that we have log space 2, 32 divided by 8, which becomes 5 minus 3, which is 2. And then the block size is log 2 of 8, which is 3. So if you see here in the cache, we have 3 bits representing each element. So what's going on here is that we have the last 3 bits, right, in this memory represent what we want here. So you see how all of them are either going to 0, 1, 1 or 1, 0, 1 here? And all of the examples here are 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1. So the oranges are 1, 0, 1. So here's what happens. Here's how the cache memory works. I am running some code in block 11101. It turns out that my next piece of code has my data in 10101. So my tag, which is 2 bits, indicates the difference between those, right? So 10 and 11. That's what the 2 bits stands for in this case. The tag. The tag tells me, and the index indicates where it is in the cache. So if I have 101, I would need to swap this out and put 101 there to maintain the integrity. And the tag is telling me where it would be in the next level. Does that make sense? So it's a map. And then tells me which ones I want to swap out. So this level of cache is much faster. This level of cache is slower. And it allows me, it's a map. It's directly mapped, indicating which ones I want to swap. So the first thing we want to do is we want to have a slightly more realistic type problem. So given a memory of 16 kilobytes, where one block is 1 byte, and a cache with 256 bytes, determine the length of the index and the tag of a directly mapped cache. So Another thing, whenever somebody says 16 kilobytes, that means it's 16 through 84. 16 through 84 is 2 to the 14. That's just, 64 kilobytes is actually 65,536. Am I assuming that you all knew that? You shouldn't have. Okay, so sometimes when you see somebody say 16 kilobytes, that doesn't actually mean 16 on the nose. There's a notation. And they want to have it closest, the closest power, right? So 64 kilobytes in this case is 2 to the 6, right? But if you're getting up there, 2 to the 16, it's actually 65536. Don't blame me. I didn't come up with that. That's just the way it is. So in this case, that becomes 2 to the 14. So that's where we start. So we come up with the size of our tag. We have 2 to the 14 divided by 2 to the 8, which is 256, right? So 2 to the 14 minus 2 to the 8 is 6, which is we come up with our tag. And then 8 is our index. Yes.
So just like saying what you were just saying about the 16 kilobytes and all that. So like when you buy a phone that says it has 64 gigabytes of memory, it's that same concept.
Yeah. Yes.
So if you're going from 16 kilobytes, how do you end up with bits as your?
What is a kilobyte? Because I maintain those the same. So basically this would be 16 through 84 times 8, right? And then 256 bytes times 8. And this will go away. It's a good question. Oh, and also because I indicate where a block is 1 byte. Block is the smallest amount of memory you can swap. So, therefore, very good question. I probably should have been more clear about that. So, yeah, to answer the question, I indicated the block is 1 byte, and then cache is 256 bytes, and then the memory is 16 kilobytes. So I was attempting to maintain that does an attempt to make the problem simpler. Bridget looks skeptical. You did not make the question simpler. All right, so this is actually example 3.6. At one point, this was example 5.6. So this is the different stages. The actual solution is going to be here, this one. But I want to explain what's actually going on here. So I've kind of explained this different concept of swapping everything out, right? So given a directly mapped cache with 8 words, and the address references 22, 26, 22, 26, 16, 3, 16, and 8. Show the sequence for accessing the cache and assume that the cache is initialized as empty. So what that means is all of our valid bits are going to be no, which means it's going to be a cache miss. So then first thing we're going to do is calculate the binary values of the numbers I gave. So 22, 26, 16, 3, and 18. In this case, let me zoom in so those of you in the cancel, please. Those of you in the back can see. So this is example 3.6. So 22 is 10110. 26 is 11010. 16 is 10000. 3 is 00011. And 18 is 10010. I would expect you to be able to do that on an exam. So I've said that the cache has 8 words in it. So that means that your block, your index relates to the block, right? So 8 That means log 2 of 8 is equal to 3. So you can see here, you can set up, so what I expect you to do is I expect you to set up this table and then have the final solution in there. Now oftentimes people will come up with different ways to do this out. I don't even expect you to do this all out on your TGO like this. I'm providing more information than is required to show you the stages. So the first thing, we get 22, right? 22, the index is 110, right? So you go to 110, this becomes yes, the tag is 10, and then the memory element is what was contained in 10110, right? Next, we would do 26, right? So we go to 010. So here's how we go to 010. We would make it yes. The tag would become 11, and then memory 11010, right? You see how that works so far? Then 22 and 26 are the next two accesses, right? So we've done 22 and 26, 22 and 26. So what does that mean? What have we encountered in those two steps? Yes, exactly right. It's a cache hit. That means our valid bit is yes. We go there. Hey, is 010 used? Yes. What's the tag? 11. Oh, good. I'm tagged 11. We don't need to do a swap, right? Same thing. Go to 110. You 110? Yeah. Are you being used? Yes. What's your tag? 10. Okay, good. That's what I am. So we don't need to swap again. You're there. Awesome. Then we have 16. Index is 000. We would do 10. Change it to yes. And then memory of 10000. And then 3 is 011. We look at 011. Yes. 00. Memory 00011. Bracket. And then we go to 16. It's a hit. And we look at 18. 18 is 010. We go to 010. Oh, look, we have this here. So what do we have to do now? Swap. Very good. So now we would make this 10. And instead of 11, it becomes 10. So if we go down to the end, we will see that that's how we ended up. So all of these little marks here, that's yes, 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 and yes. So we just swap out 26 for 18, and this is that's the final solution. So writing out the steps is the best way to do it. Is you'll see the tag and index. Once you've practiced it a few times and come up with a few examples, you'll actually see, oh, this is 8. Now we have to put the last. And it's going to be something simple like an 8-bit. More than likely, an exam will be 8 elements in the cache. Because doing that is comparing it with set associativity, which will be the last thing we cover today. Allows it to be broken into blocks of 4, because the sets are how we can break it into a number of sets, and the goal, getting back to your question, is trying to access it faster. So does anybody have any questions about this before we move on? So one thing I want to note is that this is kind of how when we do load word instructions, we start the next exam material and we start doing MIPS C to MIPS coding. What's going to happen is I'm going to say, what's a load word? All right, well, I need to get something from the registers and then bring it from data memory and bring it to the registers, right? And before, I'd say go to data memory, and then I would leave kind of this open-ended, what's in data memory? This magical black box that no one knows what's going on, right? Well, now you know what's going on. We know that we have to go in there, we have to check level 1 cache, I have to check level 2 cache, I I can use my tag and index to find it and then bring it back, right? So now you know how the memory actually works. And the whole idea, this is the end of the pointer for those of you taking C++ or C. And so to compare, we're going to do set associativity. And the whole idea is we're going to call it an n-way set associative cache, meaning that we're going to break down your cache into a certain number of blocks. It's typically 2, 4, or 8-way set associative. On the exam, you'll see a 2-way set associative, and I'll ask you to do a direct and set associative and compare the performance. So a set associative cache is formally defined as a cache structure that has a fixed number of locations where each block can be placed. And as I said, an n-way set associative has n locations for each block. So what we're going to see is how that affects the tag and the index. And so for example 3.7, we're actually going to use the same access order, 22, 26, 22, 26, 16, 3, 16, and 18. And we're going to see how that potentially improves. So what's going to happen is, for each index, we are going to have 2 memory elements instead of 1. So basically what happens is, in this case, we have 8 words. So if we're doing a 2-way set associative cache, what that means is we're going to take 8, divide it by 2, and get 4, right? And what that number 4 means is 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you see how that works? So now we have index, 2 valid, 2 tags, and 2 data elements, right? So it starts out empty, just like before. So if we were to do this and go all white here, right? Get rid of all this to make it all make sense. Simplest way to do it is we know that the index is going to be the last 2 numbers. So the first thing you're going to want to do is write them all out, right? And then you're going to want to use the first one for your first element, and then if you have the second element, you're going to want to use the second one. So remember we had to swap out 26 and put in 18, right? Remember that? In this case, we'll be able to avoid that. So in the first case, it's going to be 22. 22 is 1, 0, so we're going to change this to yes. We're going to do tag is going to be 1, 0, 1. Data is memory. We're just going to call this 22 for space, right? 26 is 1, 0, so yes. Change this valid bit to yes. Then it's 1, 1, 0, right? And then data is memory 26, right? Next is going to be 22 and 26, so we have 2 cache hits. So we see miss, miss, then 22 is a hit, 26 is a hit. 16 is a miss because it's 0, 0. We change this to yes. Our tag is 1, 0, 0, so this becomes 1, 0, 0. And then data is memory 16, right? So we're here, 3, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, right? So our tag is the last 2. Previously in direct, it was 3, right? And so what we're doing is we're splitting it up into 2 and associating the last 2 with the tag, right? Does that make sense? I'm happy to explain it if there's confusion. All right. So then it's 1, 1. We go 0, 0, 0. Memory 3, right? And then 16 is a hit, and then we get to 18. Well, 18 is 1, 0. Well, now we've run into the same kind of problem, right? Because now we have both 1 zeros are filled. So here's a question. Which one do we want to swap out? 22 or 26? 22, which is the right answer, but why? Very good. That's usually a minute long, like me trying to cajole the answer out, but you guys got it immediately. That's outstanding. Yeah, it was least recently used, right? So that's what we want. We would replace 22 and then overwrite 22 due to LRU. Now, how many of you answered that because you could read it at the bottom? Not that I accuse you of cheating, nothing. I just amused. So then you have, this is what I expect to see in your homework right there, right? Yes?
So since the 22 and 26 are in the same cache,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what, like that first one is in the first spot versus the second.
Correct. Okay, so it doesn't matter about the first versus the second. That's the whole reason we created set associativity. So that way, instead of having to do a swap here, we could just use the second set to store it without having to induce any other kind of cache miss. The whole objective is to increase the cache hit rate. Yes?
What's LRU stand for?
Least recently used. Let me write that up and then I'll get to your questions. So, least recently used. Okay.
Is this cache for the actual data or just the rotation data?
The actual data as well.
Okay.
So this memory here is whatever was stored at that location. So you have the index, you got the tag to know which ones you're swapping out, and you actually have the physical data.
So it's not, the data isn't the binary number back in
No, the memory at this location.
Okay.
Think of it as a pointer, right? I know that the memory at this location will now be stored as a here's the answer to your question. A copy of the data in the data memory will be stored in the cache at this location. So whatever was in that data location is now stored in that data element. So it could be anything. Yes, Alex?
Does each row of that cache, that table of cache, is that each of those rows still a block in the cache, or is
Yeah.
there another thing?
Well, each,
Because it's,
no, it's a block. The block is the minimum amount you can transfer. So in the last stage, right, we had to overwrite 22 and put in 18.
yeah.
That's a block.
All right. Then does that mean that each of those, or that each location in the cache is stored in 2 blocks?
Correct.
Okay.
That's what's known as two-way set associative. So for those of you watching on the video later, the question is, each row, does that mean it's storing 2 blocks? Yes. That's why previously we defined this as a two-way set associative cache. 2 blocks in each associativity. And so to wrap up this section, I have a combined problem, the type that you'll see on the exam. This is example 3.8, not 5.8. And we're going to go through, this is a good way to kind of practice this, right? And so what you're going to want to see on an exam. And so after this problem, this is where the material for exam 1 concludes. And exam 1, well, after this we'll do a brief exam review. This is where the last step. So given a cache hierarchy of 8 words with a cache access time of 5 nanoseconds and a memory access time of 20 nanoseconds, that means for each of our cache hits it's 5 nanoseconds, and for our memory access time it's 20 nanoseconds. We are given the following set of memory addresses. So this is a little longer than you'll see on an exam, but you get the idea. 22, 28, 31, 30, 22, 16, 13, 31, 8, 5, 13, 8, and 5. You'll see why I picked these numbers. They kind of flow out and make certain things work in certain parts of the problem. If the cache is at part A, if the cache is directly mapped, show the sequence. Good job, Dr. Morrison. Show the sequence for accessing the cache and calculate the total time. B, if the cache is a two-way set associative cache, show the sequence for the accessing the cache and calculate the total time. Calculate the improvement in performance. Sound familiar? Over the direct map cache in part A. So for part A, we've calculated it out. We have 22, we have our binary, 22, 28, 31, 16, 13, 8, and 5. First thing you should do before any other ordering, write those all out. And then you know that we have a direct map cache with 8 words, so our index is the last 3 bits. So I would go through there and see which ones are the same. Because Dr. Morrison's probably put in there at least one where they're the same, so you're going to have to do a swap at some point. So as I've indicated, log of 8 is 3. And then the sequence, you can figure it out. 22 and 28 are both misses because the cache is initially empty. Let me go back up to the problem statement. You should assume that the cache is empty. In fact, this is at 5 point. I will add on your exam question, as I usually do. I will add that statement there. That's important for determining the access time, because your initial miss means that you have to go to the next level, right? So you're getting it from the next level and bringing it back. So it's a cache miss. So 22 and 28 are misses. 31 is a miss. So we know 22 and 28. 110, 101. 111 is a miss, so it's going to be in 111. 22 is a hit because it's already in there, right? 16 is a miss. 16 is in 000. 13 is a miss because it's in 101. So far we haven't had anything where we've had to swap. 31 is a hit. It's already there. 8 is a miss. Now 8, we see it's 000, right? So that means we have to swap out 16, because 16 was there initially, right? And then put in 8. So 8 miss, overwrite 16. 5, we look at 5. 5 is 101. 13 happens to be 101. We had 13 in there. It's a miss, and we overwrite 13. 13 comes next. I'm putting that. Why would I put that in there? What concept am I trying to teach? I said a T word at the beginning of lecture about operating systems. Something a shark does when they're about to eat something. Thrashing, right? So here, I'm not just saying 13 and 5 and 5, 13 to torture you. I'm trying to reinforce this concept of thrashing. And then 8 would be a hit, 5 would be a miss, and overwrite 13. So then your solution box will be like this. I've seen all kinds of different ways students have figured it out without having to do what I did in the first example, put out those 7 blocks. And then what you want to do is you want to go through and find the number of misses and the number of hits. And you just do 3 hits times 5. This should be 9 times... Okay, so I was correct here. This is wrong. This should be 25, because that's 5 plus 20. So then for part B, we go through the same sequence. We have 22 is a miss, 28 is a miss, 31 is a miss, just like before. 22 is a hit. Now 16 is a miss, and we put it in 00. We know that the last 2 bits are your index, because we have a 2-way set associative cache. 13 is a miss, because we're loading in there. 31's a hit. 8's a miss. But remember last time, this is where we started doing this thrashing. See how it's not there anymore? That's where the 2-way set associative benefits in terms of speed up of cache performance. So when you work through this, you'll be able to see how it actually works. This will be your solution. And then the last step, I asked for an improvement in performance. I made the same mistake here. This should be 25 and not 20, but it would be 5 times 5 plus 7 times 25. So then the ratio is going to be 3 times 5 plus 7 times 3 times 5 plus 9 times 25 over 5 times 5 plus 7 times 25. And that would be good enough on an exam. Yes, I.
Is the two-way associative method always going to be faster than the?
Almost always. Unless I get really, because the only difference is you see how the index is 0, 0. I've done this before, and I found some weird combination where you can do 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, something that screws up two-way set associative but doesn't necessarily screw up direct associativity. But in this type of question, I will be this explicit on the exam. Calculate the improvement of performance over the direct map cache. So that means if you get a better time for a direct map cache, your calculation is wrong. Okay. So we have 5 minutes. What are you all expecting on exam 1? Yes.
The differences between computer architecture and
computer something else? No. Computer disorganization? Okay. What else could I ask? Okay, performance, there'll be the performance question. What else could I ask about? Amdahl's law. What else could I ask about? Okay, restoring versus non-restoring division. Restoring and non-restoring division. What else could I ask about?
Sign multiplication.
Yep, sign multiplication. Okay, the principles of locality. Let me save that in because there's a couple other arithmetic type things I want to ask. I could ask. Floating point addition. And what's the IEEE term? IEEE 754. So I'd expect you to produce the answer in IEEE 754. What else could I ask about? Okay, what are the three types? State the 3 types of MIPS instructions. And what else did I ask for? I asked for drawings, right? And draw the format. All right, I'm sorry, I should not state. If I'd state, it would just be R type, I type, and J type. Define them and draw them. What else could I ask? Last thing we covered last lecture. Yep, 5 types of memory addressing. What other things did we cover today? I'm sorry, one thing I think principles of locality. Right? So specifically, you talk about cache, like direct versus set associativity. And what else? There's one other big thing we covered today. Average memory access time. Right? All right, so here's how exam 1 will work. Upon completion of Tuesday's lecture, there will be the take-home portion available on Blackboard. The take-home portion consists of 35% of the grade. There is a job solicitation, the front page, of a job that upon completion of this course you would actually be eligible to apply for and get. I do these exams as a way to simulate the job application process. Part 1. I have posted a sample resume under professional references on Blackboard. This weekend I will do about a 30-minute video and post it on Blackboard, not on YouTube. And the reason I'm posting it on Blackboard, not on YouTube, is because I don't want everybody else in America getting the things that Intel told me what they're looking for in a resume, right? I don't want Mississippi State having it. I don't want LSU having them. The only people I want them to have them is you guys, right? So I'm maintaining the advantage for you guys. You work hard for me. You do all the TGOs. I'm going to try to put you in the best possible position to get the best possible job. You're going to do the resume. You're actually going to put it in the format that I have on there. I want you to take that seriously. Don't put it off to the last minute. Act as though you're actually applying for the job. Step 2, you actually are offered a job interview. The step 2 of the take-home portion is fundamental questions that we covered in class. You're allowed to use your TGOs, you're allowed to use your videos, you're not allowed to work together on it. And let's be honest, we all know take-home tests, we all know people have cheated on this, right? Professors aren't silly, professors aren't stupid. But here's the rule. Let's say, Aaron Brocktow cheats off of brain party. Find me 2 cheats off find me 3. So, all right. So, but here's the thing. Let's say you get the job once you cheat off her. Are you going to give her any of your money? So if you're a person, are you going to let? And if you're not, the diploma's not going to have your name on it too, right? So there's no benefit to you to allow somebody to cheat. There's no benefit to you to cheating because part 3 will be the in-class portion. And if you get like a perfect score on the take-home portion and you bomb the in-class portion, it's a pretty good sign. So the take-home the second portion of the take-home portion is actually rewarding you for putting in the effort to study. And actually, that's how you sit down and prepare for the job interview. And then the third part is the actual job interview.
So you said that on the take-home portion we cannot use our TGOs.
You may.
Okay.
You may. It's like you're preparing for the job interview because you'll have your textbook, you'll have your lecture notes, you'll have the YouTube video. It allows me to see, okay, I can actually demonstrate that you studied for the exam, right? Because you actually went through your notes. More than likely, most of you will get very close to a perfect score on this portion because it's just preparing. And everything that's used in that section, use that to study for these parts, and you'll be able to complete it. All right? Yeah, there's your exam review. You all knew exactly what would be on there.